Welcome to episode 74 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We're back at Bristol, but there's no dirt. Instead, we traded it for tire pellets. Goodyear heard us complain about how this tire's too tough, there's no fall off. They said, all right, we'll see you at Bristol, bet.
Yeah, Bob, I haven't seen that many marbles on the ground since the last Home Alone movie, but Toyota continues to dominate early in this season. If it wasn't Ty Gibbs, it ended up being Denny Hamlin. Lots to break down here.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
Well, Bob, episode 74 of the Breaking Balls podcast. If you're here listening, thank you so much. We can all finally exhale because that was exciting. One of the better races we've watched in a very long time. Bob, take it away.
Listen, there were people out there that were saying, bring back the dirt. Bristol needs to be, if you're going to do it on concrete, one race a year. Those people that were arguing that look like fools today. Because let me tell you, that was one of the best NASCAR races I've watched in a long time. For multiple reasons, we're going to get down to each level of it. But honestly, it had something for everyone. And just coming away watching that, you said, this was an old school NASCAR race with a lot of action.
Yeah, jam-packed with action, strategy. Tempers flared a little bit from time to time. This race had something for everyone. It was, like you said, kept you engaged from stage one to the checkered flag. There was just so much going on. I don't even know necessarily where we're going to start, but I guess with the winner would make sense.
We'll do a quick little recap. Yeah, Denny Hamlin won, but like you said, it's so rare for NASCAR events, especially nowadays, where you've got the interest from stage one to stage three, from start to finish. And today was one of those few exceptions where, every lap was must-see TV. Like you said, Denny Hamlin comes away the winner. It feels like that's kind of the side story here, to be quite honest with you, because Denny Hamlin gets his first win of the year. Toyota's just showing dominance on short tracks, but everyone's talking about tire cordon today and tire marbles. Just what a day.
Yeah, you started to see it as as the stage went on, the thick layer of just black on the edge of the track. You know that the marbles are there, but you don't often see them as clearly. But we've been talking about this, especially on this podcast, about how the tire is too good. People were basically able to go out there and run qualifying lap after qualifying lap, and the cars are obviously all spec'd cars, so if they're going to be as fast as kind of the information you have. And then today happened. Goodyear gave us a tire that honestly, at the onset of the race, I thought we were going to be dealing with, Indianapolis, and I think it was 2008 all over again. But Bob, it turned out it was one of the better things that could have happened to this race, in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. You saw it just from the competitiveness. I think it was 54 lead changes, a record for NASCAR short tracks. I mean, that is staggering alone. But yeah, it was just the fact that these cars were almost ticking time bombs with their tires. But yeah, like you said, a lot of people compared it to Indianapolis way back in the day. But they had to throw competition cautions every 10 or 15 laps in that. This was the difference here. It was in the driver's hands. Yeah, they knew that the tire was going to be, cheese graded basically on this Bristol concrete, but still you knew what you had and you knew you had to save. And at the end of the day, you saw the guys that have been there before, Truex, Keselowski, obviously Denny Hamlin, your winner, are the guys that ended up there at the end. It really just showed that, yes, it was old school, but also whatever Goodyear has done in the lab for the last, couple of months here. They said, this weekend you're really going to see tire fall off. My God, it wasn't tire fall off. They were riding around on rims half the time there by the end of the stages.
Yeah, it was so wild because, like you said, it wasn't quite Indianapolis because the driver did have a sense of control. It was just stage one. No one realized that the tire was going to fall off that bad. You kind of heard the murmurs of it and stuff after qualifying in the short practice session that they did have at Bristol, and everybody was kind of like, we came here with one setup. We really don't know what this tire is going to do. And then to really throw the curveball at them, they threw the resin as opposed to the PJ1 on the track. And I don't know what that had to do with it. I don't know if the weather was the reason that the rubber decided not to stick to the track. But at this point, I'm not gonna ask too many questions because I absolutely loved everything we saw today. It was the most compelling racing we've seen in a very long time.
And I think that the interesting thing for me is that this was the same tire they used at the fall Bristol race. I don't know what changed, but obviously something in these cars had, because like you said, Ad, the whole time in the last 2 or 3 years, you've heard the thing with Goodyear is the tires are too good. There's no fall off. You can run qualifying laps, like you said, and really, from lap 1 of your run to lap 30, there may be a small difference, but otherwise, tires weren't that big of a deal. Today, it was the talking point, obviously, and we're going to hammer it home, but I mean, it was literally, after you saw stage 1, it was a learning curve where, okay, we are literally cording these tires down to the very last thread. You got to calm it down a little bit. You can't run qualifying laps out there. And you saw guys learn the hard way. You saw some guys figure it out just kind of halfway through the stage by default. But yeah, like you said, this was the kind of race where it gave you so many storylines that was natural, and it was still racing at the end of the day too.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the pictures that were coming out in the middle of stage 1. I think Colleague ended up posting the picture of the tire that it basically looked like they had run on a cheese grater. I mean, you were just down to the threads. It really gave me an appreciation of, how fast they're going, to be honest with you, because sometimes I think that's lost, especially when there's no tire fall off. And then most importantly, it just added an element of the race to where guys couldn't go flat out. But the problem is that you're on, bull ring, you're on the bull ring at basically Bristol. It's a half-mile track. You just don't have anywhere to go. I mean, so you've got guys who are trying to, make time. You've got guys who are trying to save tire. And when they run into each other, there's some split-second decisions that had to be made today that, really, I think that's the type of thing that makes these drivers shine, especially when there's not that big of a difference in the car. It was hilarious. I think Todd Gilliland was the most noted slow driver of the day, almost caused, I think, 3 cautions. I think he confirmed 2, maybe a third. But it was crazy to me to see all the different strategies and whatnot that these crew chiefs had to really figure out on the fly.
It was, and also it was a slow burn where you had the first 100 laps or so going, oh my god, okay, this is how it's going to be. Are we going to even survive? Are they going to run out of tires here? And it was slowly just a building of crescendo where the drivers started to figure out a little bit, okay, we can only run 16 and a half second laps, or whatever the runoff was there. It was roughly around 16 to 17 seconds. Qualifying laps were around 15 and a half seconds there. I mean, they were down 2 seconds by halfway through the race just because they realized we have to back it down. But I think the fascinating thing was that, like I said, it was slowly building into crescendo, and you got that in stage 3 where you had green flag cycle pit stops at Bristol, which doesn't happen rarely, while these guys are driving on basically grenade tires. You don't know when these tires are going to, quote, I guess they kept saying the car was going to stop, just give out, Clint Boyer was calling it, but the fact that some guys, like you said, are running qualifying laps, trying to pace their way through the field on new tires. Some guys are holding on to their tires with the lead. And then you've got a little bit of mix of everything else in the field. Guys, 2-3 laps down, new tires, old tires. It was just everywhere you looked on the track, there was something else going on. Honestly, for this was the one time I'm giving Fox credit. Their poor director was probably just pointing at every camera going, it was like ADD out there.
Yeah, and then honestly, stage 1, everybody just kind of ran it and really didn't know what to do. They just kind of came with what they had off the truck. And then, stage 2, it was a scramble. It was legitimately a scramble. You saw the best minds in this sport, the crew chiefs and all the engineers and whatnot, just really having to throw darts at the wall. I mean, there was guys taking 2 tires and then only running in the resin. There were guys who were only running on the outside. There were guys who would run 1 corner on the outside and then 1 corner, 1 corner on the high line and 1 corner on the low line. Anything to get more out of these tires. It was just, the broadcast kept calling it a science experiment, and I agree. I mean, and this is when NASCAR is at its best, because I think, in the old days of NASCAR, because of the way that the cars were designed and the fabrication of the body, that ingenuity was more seen in that aspect of it, to where, you got your advantages in the shop. Now, I mean, the only thing you can really be, kind of unique with is your race strategy. And usually it doesn't really pay off unless there's a well-timed caution or something like that. Today, I would say more so than any race we've probably ever podcasted about, the race strategy was probably the most important thing that got guys to the end, and being able to, have the driver communicate, hey, this is what's happening with the car. This is what's happening with the tires. And it was a full team effort because it absolutely had to be today. There was just so many variables that made this interesting.
Like you said, there was just strategy was the key here. And when can you say that about a NASCAR race? A lot of times where strategy was the biggest factor here. You had, guys like Corey LaJoie and Carson Osfar stay out late in the stage 2 because they thought we can hold on for tires, and they became sitting ducks out there. And then you see someone like Josh Berry, who pits early in that green flag cycle in stage 3, was running late teens there after showing an early speed. We'll get to him later, but for him to be the first car on pit road for 4 or 5 laps while everyone was waiting for this inevitable caution that never came, he ended up making up time and was running in the top 5 there late until, his tires ended up falling off. It seems like if Josh Berry would have probably pitted about 2 or 3 laps later, we might be talking about Josh Berry in the top 5. But that is just, it shows the fine margin in this race where if you pit 4 or 5 laps difference, you might be completely out of the top 10 instead of the top 5. It just, like we said, when is that ever in a NASCAR race?
And think about this one too, Bob. Tyler Reddick ended up, I think he started 21st or 20th in this race. And then with the first early caution, he was one of the only cars that stayed out. And nobody really knew how bad the tires were. And he gambled because obviously the strategy allowed for it, but ultimately didn't pay off, got in that early wreck in stage 1. And, we kind of never saw him again. But just the way that it was almost like everybody knew that they were going to have to throw a Hail Mary at some point in this race because of all of the unknown variables. And like I said, I just think that's what makes this sport great. It's very fun. Don't get me wrong. When these guys are on edge 100% of the time and going around and trying to get every single ounce out of the car, yes, that is entertaining. But there's also room in the sport for something like this to where guys aren't necessarily pushing the car as fast as it can go, but that's because the tires simply didn't allow for it. And I think that's the thing, almost the finesse that the sport has been missing, because obviously there's not a ton of finesse in stock car racing, there, especially in short track racing. It's all, if you want to get a space, you got to move a guy. But with the tires, it just added that little level of, hey, you have to think about this, and you can't just go out and run as fast as you can and try and move guys. It just, yeah. The strategy aspect of this is what made it so great. Do I think we need this every single week? No, I don't think so. But at the end of the day, this was a heck of a curveball, a wonderful changeup. If we're going to keep going with baseball pitches, I loved every second of this.
And you have 54 lead changes there, so it showed that guys had to learn on the fly. You had guys that would rocket to the front and then just absolutely get shredded on their tires there, would fall back in the late 10s and 20s there. Like you said, Tyler Reddick learned the hard way that those old tires are not worth it there. He was a non-factor the rest of the day after getting Zane Smith Arca braked after that spin. But, it seems like the theme today was the Toyotas there. Obviously, the veterans there, like you said, it was an art today watching Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex especially, and Brad Keselowski as well at third. But Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex going toe-to-toe there in the last 150 laps, knowing that outside of Ty Gibbs, who just completely fell off there in the last 100 laps, it was Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Whatever they were doing to conserve their tires compared to everybody else was absolutely fascinating to watch, because they were out there just knifing through the field, handling lap traffic like a breeze, which in Bristol is not easy. But, you had a couple passes for the lead where they went back and forth, used each other as picks. But, it, like you said, Ad, especially with the Toyotas, but the veterans, the guys with the strategy that can hold on to their tires and have the finesse. Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin were just the class of the field late and showed it today.
It was so funny, Bob, because in the recent years, we've really thought that this was one of those things that used to matter a lot. And now it just doesn't. There's not a lot of tracks where you're going to really get an advantage if you're riding around trying to save your tires. But, to kind of have threw it in the time machine today, we had the classic, the red and white on the walls, and we're back on the concrete, and this really felt like a throwback race. And it's no surprise that that JGR, because obviously the Toyotas have been good, but more specifically the kind of old guard that's been at JGR for a while with Denny and Martin Truex Jr. It was just impressive, like you said. I even texted you after the race. I didn't think Denny was going to have enough tire to do burnouts, but ultimately he saved tires so well that he could still burn the thing down. It was a masterclass. It really was. The best part about it is that you have no idea as a viewer, no matter how much NASCAR you've watched, you can't look at a tire while they're running around and know if it's gonna pop or not, or if it's on its last leg, unless Fox gives you the camera shot. And all credit to them, because they did a good job of emphasizing the tire, without giving people too much information. And like you said, it just kept building and building and building. We can nitpick this all we want, but I'm not going to, because it was awesome. I mean, broadcast, racing, strategy, all of it. It was awesome.
I think that's the biggest thing, is the people that are nitpicking are the ones that were calling for Goodyear to make the tire, fall off and make the drivers have a lot more control in their hands instead of, like you said, running qualifying laps. And we got what we asked for. Now, can we regress maybe a little bit? Like you said, and we don't need this every race, but I think we found something here with this short track tire. I can't imagine what this tire is going to look like at Martinsville, at North Wilkesboro. I mean, good Lord, that track, I know it just got repaved, but I'm very curious to see even Richmond, in 2 weeks, if NASCAR has the ability to play with the short track package and the tires like this, it's going to be fascinating to see, because 54 lead changes today. Like I said, you're going to see comers and goers, but I mean, the thing that I like at is that, someone like Ty Gibbs today was dominant, over 130 laps led. You thought he and Denny Hamlin were probably going to be the class of the field. And then you see the youth in Ty Gibbs, and we saw it at the Clash. We've seen it where he's had raw speed, but Ty Gibbs wasn't able to conserve his tires in the long runs late in the race. You saw him rocket to the field even after pit road penalties in stage 2, and you thought, okay, his car can do that. But whatever happened in stage 3 was not the same car that Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin were able to do. Ty Gibbs just looked like he was lost out there.
The craziest thing about it is he rocketed through the field in stage 2 on scuffs. I mean, he was on scuff tires, and he still found a way. I mean, that car was an absolute rocket ship today. I think all 4 JGR cars really had a good chance at it. There was a while there in stage 3, I think with 100 to go, they were 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
And, the old broadcaster curse ended up coming in, and Clint, I can't remember if it was Clint or Mike Joy that mentioned, they've never finished 1, 2, 3, 4. And, shortly after that, you saw the fall off. But I mean, just for a young guy.
By the way, that's crazy, though, that Joe Gibbs has never finished 1 through 4 in the Cup Series. With as much talent and the deep roster that they have there, I am shocked that Joe Gibbs has never. I mean, they led almost 400 of the 500 laps today.
Yeah, I think, it's crazy. I mean, just Denny and Ty Gibbs, I think Denny had 163 and Ty Gibbs had 137 laps led. And then, I forgot to, get the number on Martin Truex and how many laps he led. I think Christopher Bell even led a few laps. It was just, it was very clear. One thing that was abundantly clear watching this race is that a Chevy was not going to win. I think there was a portion of this race where they weren't even necessarily in the top 15. But, those Toyotas, whatever they've got going, and, I'm not sure if adding, the 2 extra cars to get a little bit more data is the help, or if this is just JGR being JGR at Bristol, because let's face facts, they've been very successful here in the past. So, yeah, it's crazy, Bob.
Well, and I'm glad you said, if it's just JGR Toyota, because it's hard to judge 2311 because Tyler Reddick spins out early is not a factor. Bubba Wallace, it seemed like he was flirting with the top 10 all day and then just kind of fell off and was a couple laps down at that pit cycle. But yeah, the biggest thing that I noticed today was Legacy Motor Club. It wasn't a great day for Eric Jones. He was kind of running around the 15th position all day. I think he finished right outside the top 20. He finished 20th there. But John Nemechek was top 10 most of the day consistently. And the fact that the new Toyota team is coming in off the streets, didn't have a lot of speed with Chevy last year, was, pretty much noted that Legacy 42 was a non-factor. And John Nemechek is coming in there and running top 10 at Bristol. It shows that whatever Toyota did at that winter test in Phoenix with the short track package, my God, they've hit on something. And yeah, like you said, the fact that someone like Legacy and their Toyotas are outrunning Hendrick at Bristol, that is just, it speaks volumes to me that Chevy, for whatever reason, is just, they're a little bit slower at these short tracks, Ad.
And you know what's wild about that whole thing, Bob, is that our eyes told us that Chevy had a really bad day, and, even Hendrick had a really bad day. And then you look at the top 10 and you realize 3 of the 4 finished in the top 10. I mean, I think Bowman ended up fourth and 5th for Larson and Bowman, Chase Elliott in 9th. I mean, it's crazy to think that, as bad as they were, they still got the result. And it's a big credit to the drivers and the teams for really kind of hanging in there and just kind of sticking with it. But it was noticeable today that they're clearly a step behind. I would even say they're a step behind the Fords because, Josh Berry had a ton of success today. And Ryan Blaney, I mean, honestly, after watching qualifying, I thought Ryan Blaney was going to have a really good chance at winning this race, obviously starting from the pole, but it just seemed like he was the only person who had that really good short run speed. Ultimately didn't have it too much in the long run, especially compared to the Toyotas, but it is wild to me that Chevy finished as well as they did today.
Yeah, I think it's more of just how it all kind of stacked out, to be quite honest with you. You know, I don't think that Alex Bowman was a fourth place car today, but the way that cycle happened out in stage 3, it's about who's there at the end, Ad, more than anything. And credit to those Hendrick guys, you know, their strategy worked out at the end. You know, to the fact that you got Kyle Larson and Bowman both in the top 5. Elliott, I think, yeah, you said 8th or 9th there. William Byron had his day derailed with a broken toe leak early, so, you know, we don't know about him, but it's just not quite the Hendrick speed that we're used to at some of these short tracks. And, you know, you had Kyle Larson win that Bristol Fall race a couple of years ago, but when you look at the guys that are veterans, that we were talking about earlier with Truex and Keselowski and Denny Hamlin, how their tires and how they control the tires and there was no fall off. You expect that from a guy like Kyle Larson, one of the best in the world. His car control is usually phenomenal, and you even saw his tires in stage 2 absolutely spotless after one of the green flag runs compared to the rest of the field. And for whatever reason, he was not able to match that. I know he had the pit road penalty that threw him into the back of the field, but you expect someone like Kyle Larson to be able to nurse those tires and end up in the green flag run. And yeah, you know, he ended up 5th. It's not like it was a bad day by any means, but I just expect him to be compete, I guess, more toward the front. And it just shows, I guess, the gap that Toyota has in the field right now.
Yeah, and especially wild because just not a lot of cars on the lead lap period, which, you know, you're kind of used to that at Bristol, but maybe not to this extent. I know you've got the stat there, so I'll let you unleash this one, Bob. Go ahead.
Oh, it's more fascinating than anything, Ad. Yeah, this is the first time since Dover in 2004 that we've only had 5 cars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars. Count them on your hand. I can count that on my hand. 5 cars finished on the lead lap today. You know, you had the old school 70s races where some guys would win by 2 and 3 laps. Yeah, that's happened where David Pearson lapped the entire field. But in 2024, with, you know, the next gen and the parity that is, the fact that you were able to see only 5 cars finish on the lead lap, man, that is just, even at Bristol, I know it's only a 15 to 17 second lap, but I mean, that is wild to see, you know, 6th place get lapped.
Yeah, it's just especially in the next gen era. I mean, it's just one of these things that this car really hasn't lent itself to that old style of racing where you see somebody really dominate. I mean, the only guy that you've really seen do it consistently is Martin Truex Jr. because when he wins, it's an ass kicking, and that's been even true in the next gen. But yeah, it just seemed like, you know, if it were truly just who had the best car, I think Ty Gibbs ultimately wins this race. And I think it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you, because he has been taking step after step after step. And it seemed like the natural step was this week, especially after winning both stage 1 and stage 2. It seemed like he was destined, but ultimately you can't teach preserving your tire. And, you know, there were just so many guys who, you know, you almost forgot how good they were at it. But, you know, Denny Hamlin certainly reminded us. Martin Truex certainly reminded us. And you hit the nail on the head. Looking at Kyle Larson's tires after stage 2 was probably the most impressive thing I've seen in a very long time, because everybody else was running on a cheese grater, and this guy comes out and, you could put those back on the car. Don't worry about it.
I expect so much from Kyle Larson when it comes to that. He's just so darn good at it. And then, you know, we kind of forget about Brad Keselowski, and you got to give him his flowers because was quietly running P3, kind of chasing down Truex and Hamlin, still running those laps and keeping his tires fresh before that green flag cycle there. And you thought maybe this is the day for the Kings Hawaiian car. I mean, obviously he had an eventful day. He had Austin Cindric just slide into him coming out of the pit box there. But, you know, add that Siamese teammate thing with Keselowski and Buescher. I guess it is real because even Buescher was out in front for a minute there today.
Yeah, I mean, I think Buescher ended up finishing 7th in this race, so we can keep the Siamese teammate thing going. I think that qualifies enough. But, dude, it was like watching, it was so sad. I mean, just watching poor Brad pull out of the pit box, had a good stop, and he said it after the race. Was it devastating to get hit on pit road? No, but it took just enough speed out of the car, and it really broke my heart because we have been talking, and kind of been pretty critical of RFK and how they may have taken a step back. And, Brad came out today and in especially, like we said, the old guard who still remembered how to save tires, he was one of them. And it was just a shame to see, obviously there's nothing you can do. I mean, that's just racing, and especially, with the pit
It's
road
just
at
so
Bristol.
ironic the car that hit him, though, Ad.
And that's what I was going to say, is that it's like, to have the 2 car of all the cars to hit Brad Keselowski, why did it have to be the 2? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I will say this, Ad, though, since we pushed the panic button on RFK 2 weeks ago after, I believe it was the Vegas race, both their cars have finished in the top 8 in the last 2 weeks. So maybe we have just turned things around. I don't know. But I do want to give another shout out because they are aligned with RFK. This is a new alliance, I guess, with Ford. But Rick Ware Racing, Justin Haley in that 51 car, and then Kaz Gralla in the 15. Top 20 results for both guys. Gralla 19th, Justin Haley 17th. You saw Gralla kind of flirting with the top 15 today, and then Justin Haley was consistently in the top 12 to top 10 all day, Ad. I want to give a shout out to them because they are clearly taking the right step. You could tell they've invested in their future with, obviously, Justin Haley in the signing, but the RFK Alliance, they're not just that back marker Rick Ware cars that you're used to in the last few years that we've made fun of. I mean, it's really nice to see.
No, exactly. And this is what NASCAR was hoping for with the next gen car. If you put investment into the sport and you actually, you go out there and week to week, you bring your stuff to the racetrack, you spend the money, you will be competitive. And I think this is proof of that. Because how else do you explain, Rick Ware Racing taking that big of a jump in 1 year? I think the alliance is brilliant. I think, having Justin Haley in the car, we all kind of scratched our heads a little bit when he signed there because we're like, man, that's kind of like signing your death warrant, it felt like, especially as a Cup driver. But ultimately, it's good to see that they're investing in him. And yeah, I agree, Bob. We do have to give them their flowers because, of course, do I think a race win is coming? No, I don't think so. Maybe not this year, but they're certainly building something. It feels like RFK, maybe 2 years ago, to where, it just seems like they have the right pieces in place to where if they are going to build a winning culture or a culture that can at least, get these results, like you said, where, top 15 is probably the realistic expectation right now. But if they keep doing that, it's good for the sport as a whole. And it was one of those things. I looked at the ticker and saw him. I believe it was running 7th, and I thought it was some sort of typo, but no, he was there for a few laps, really mixing it up, being competitive. And if it wasn't for the tire fall off, which has been the story of our podcast at this point, he probably would have had a pretty good chance of finishing in the top 10.
And that was part of the reason that NASCAR didn't take that 51 charter from Rick Ware. If you finish in the bottom 3 each season, for I think it's 3 seasons in a row for NASCAR, they have the right to take your charter because it's not competitive. But they even cited the Justin Haley signing for Rick Ware as, hey, it shows that they are invested in competing in the future. Not saying, like you said, they're going to win races. But yeah, I like the comparison with RFK, maybe a front row or a Spire even, where Spire is building something toward the future. Their goal last year was just, top 20, top 15, build on that with Corey LaJoie. You might be able to see that with Justin Haley and Rick Ware. I don't know, but even Kaz Gralla, a solid day for him, keeping the car clean. Listen, like we said, they're not going to be overnight championship hunters, but this isn't the same Rick Ware that we've made fun of in the last few years. Oh, they don't have the speed. They're going to run 35th all week. No, they are competitive enough to where you could claw and scratch and maybe even fight a top 10 or a top 15 each week. This isn't the first time we've seen Justin Haley running in the top 20, Ad.
No, I agree. And you know what? I'll continue with a little bit of the Ford praise because just outside of the top 10 and the top 15, Josh Berry, Chase Briscoe, welcome to relevance, sir, and Ryan Preece. I mean, SHR, way to go, pal.
We mentioned Josh Berry, Ad. And first, we'll do on track and then we'll do off track because this is how we are breaking balls here. On track, Josh Berry looked like he had some speed when he had clean air, and it was just nice to see him actually, building something in that 4 car because, no bones about it. That's a tough way to inherit that 4 car with Kevin Harvick. And also, the Stewart-Haas struggles have been noted, but it seems like they looked like they were okay this week, Ad.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Even to have Ryan Preece finishing right behind him, it's just good to see that they've got something going for them. I think, the super speedway package wasn't quite there. And then, Atlanta, I mean, like I said, if you don't have the super speedway package at Atlanta, you're going to have a tough go. But, to see them have a little bit more success on the short tracks, especially with the new body, it just seems like they're figuring things out a little bit. I think this is definitely a building block, especially for Josh Berry. I just think, like you said, anytime you replace a legend, and that's what Kevin Harvick is in this sport, he's a legend. I mean, you're going to have a tough time filling the number. I just think this is definitely a step in the right direction for them. It showed that with all things considered, especially with the tire fall off that nobody really expected, it was good to see them have some success today. I mean, it was getting grim. I'll say that much.
I wasn't willing to press the panic button yet just because it is his first season, but you do want to see him grow. And this is the weekend that you needed from the 4 team where, hey, there is something here we can build off of. Now, I do have to just, go off track here for a second because Mike Joy was talking about Hendersonville, Tennessee again today, and that, catches my eye every time. I even saw an article in the Tennessean. I just want our Breaking Balls fans to know this. Josh Berry and Taylor Swift did go to high school together. Joseph Newgarden didn't go to that high school, though. He went to the high school next door. And I love Mike Joy. I love where the heart was. But only 2 of those people are commandos. So, I don't want to give any false valor, stolen valor to Joseph Newgarden. It wasn't his fault. But Joseph Newgarden is not a Hendersonville commando. He's a Pope John Paul Knight. He went to the Catholic school, just for the record.
So, Mike Joy, I do need you to issue a correction. Because he was naming the 3 most famous alumni of Hendersonville High School. Go Commandos.
And did you notice one thing about the erasure? They kept talking about Taylor Swift and Josh Berry. They never mentioned the city or the school. Erasure. No. Erasure that I will not stand for.
And this is what I will say, is that he did have number 1 and number 2 correct on the most famous alumnuses of the school. Because it is most definitely Taylor Allison Swift and Josh Berry. But number 3, let me tell you right now, he was number 74 in your football programs around 2013 to 2014, and number 1 in your hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, the 3rd most famous alumni is my co-host, Bob Perry. The commando of all commandos. Or the number 3 commando of all commandos. And you know what? I was not going to stand by and let Mike Joy ruin my friend's name. Bob, you will always be the 3rd most famous member. The 3rd most famous alumni of Hendersonville High School.
Just for the record for our fans, 3rd most famous, but that's in the early voting. We still have a chance to take Josh. We just need our fans to push the polls up a little bit. But great to hear Josh Berry talked about on the broadcast. Maybe it gives Hendersonville a little pub moving forward there. It helps the podcast for sure. But, we might as well talk about him. Did you see the greatest car on the track today? It may have only run 23rd, but I'm glad to see him out there again. AJ Allmendinger was back in the Cup Series like he belongs. I don't care what Colleague Racing has to say, filling it with other people. AJ Allmendinger is the 16 and had the best scheme out there with the Cheetos Mountain Dew all-black Camaro ad. The justice for the dinger is back.
The Mountain Dew Cheeto Chevrolet looked really good on the track and even better with the man driving it behind the wheel. I'm going to stop with that now. But yeah, no, it's every time AJ Allmendinger's running in Cup, especially, road courses is one thing because he's always got a chance when we go to a road course. But to see him at Bristol, it kind of makes you wonder, hey, this guy might be good to have the full-time seat in Cup this year. But hey, who am I?
If you're listening to this podcast and you're maybe new or, don't listen too much, you're going, I think I've heard Bob say that last week. I have. I say it every week, and I'm going to say it every week because it's freaking stupid what they're doing with that 16 charter. But I digress. I'm sure Allmendinger will go to COTA next week and win, and that will be a tainted win because it won't even matter for their playoff hopes. Anyway, take me away before I burst a blood vessel.
Well, I think, you may be able to not burst a blood vessel, but mine's coming because I don't know who allowed FICO to sponsor a car. I don't want to be reminded about my credit score while I'm watching NASCAR. I was happy when Kyle Busch started driving backwards because at least gave me an excuse to not necessarily be able to read it. But if I have to hear about my credit score while watching a race again, I'm going to lose my damn mind. Next thing you know, the IRS is going to be sponsoring a car, and I'm just going to have to give up altogether.
that was a weird partnership. Kyle Busch has gone from 3Chi to FICO, but one thing he hasn't gone away from is the pit road issues. I don't know what is going on with that RCR camp. It seems like ever since last summer, there's just been something in the water with that 8 and 3 team, because Austin Dillon was out there, today, kind of as a traffic cone for the leaders. But yeah, you notice Kyle Busch today led for a moment, had pit road issues, spun again. It just seems like this is kind of the new Kyle Busch.
Yeah, it just seems like Kyle Busch seems to love getting pit road penalties. And, as far as his partner there at RCR, I think the only time you hear Austin Dillon's name is when Mike Joy says at some point after one of the numerous cautions, and Austin Dillon has received the lucky dog, the free pass. And it just seems like that is perennially where he's at. And
he's life in the wave around lane.
It truly is. He's life as the lucky dog. But it just doesn't, it's not, there's something missing. And I don't know, obviously we're not in the shops. We have no idea what's going on as far as, the data side of it or anything like that. But just culture-wise, it just seems like, is Kyle Busch fully invested in this? You can ask all sorts of questions. I mean, your father first. I think obviously Brexton's career is getting more and more serious. Is this just what we, are kind of going to have to come to expect out of Kyle Busch? I mean, right now, it doesn't look like either of them are really getting set up to be in the playoffs. I mean, obviously it's very early. We can't hit the panic button quite yet, but they've definitely got something they need to work on early in the year.
100%, because you look at Kyle Busch last year, the shine and the sparkle of the new signing when he's coming to RCR, you saw that team energized. They already were coming off a huge 2022 with Tyler Reddick, where they were competitive and won multiple races. And you see them win at California last year. They win in Talladega in April, and you have 2 wins already in the first 2 months of the season. I think they won maybe 1 race since then. I mean, it just feels like that team is as slowly after the shock and awe of that, new relationship has come together. The honeymoon stage is over. And like you said, I don't know what the issue is, because Kyle Busch is still running very competitive in the Truck Series and Xfinity when he's in there. But it's notable that 8 car has taken a step back, especially in the last few years when they've been really competitive with Tyler Reddick, and even in Kyle Busch's first year. I'm not seeing that ad. And like you said, it's too early to push that panic button, but it is trending the wrong way for that 8 team.
I'll tell you what, though, I do feel like, kind of like a wartime president, because I've got this panic button sitting on my desk and I'm just waiting, man. I'm just chomping at the bit to hit it for different teams, whether it's RCR or SHR, it does not matter. I'm just trying to hit it on somebody, if we're going to be honest.
If you're not a Ford, you've got a panic button in your office. I'm sure at some point you'll press it.
That feels fair. I mean, well, yeah, no, that's fair. I was going to make an excuse there. I was going to go lawyer on you and make an argument, but I'm just in no mood to do it.
Listen, if you're not in Toyota, you could probably be sweating any week. But if you're a Toyota, you have a shot at feels like everywhere right now. I mean, Toyotas are locked in, and you look at some of the guys in the field. I mean, Harrison Burton's out there, I guess, but it's not great. Obviously, we've done our RCR slander, but even, Joey Logano, 22nd this week. Too early to press the panic button, but it seems like he's starting to more and more rely on winning to get in the playoffs. And it's a trend with these guys. You're not going to lose your season off in 1 week, but you're starting to look. This is race number 5 now we're in. We're almost a fifth of the way into the regular season, and it's starting to shape up, the trends and directions of what the season's going to be like. You don't want to be playing catch up halfway through the season.
No, certainly not. And, just ask Chase Elliott fans. I mean, bad luck is contagious. And obviously, good finish for him today, not on the lead lap. But at the same time, it's like, eventually you kind of start looking in the mirror and you're like, is this a permanent thing? Are we ever going to get back into victory lane? I think the longer you stay, not being successful in this sport, the more it begins to weigh on you. I kind of feel that way about Brad Keselowski too. I think today does a lot for his confidence, obviously, because the idea that these types of races still exist, I think that really gives RFK a good chance, because, you can't, like I said it earlier in the podcast, you can't coach experience, you can't teach experience, and you can't, it just seems like that is where they are at, that's where they have their advantage. And it's good to see that there's races like today where they can kind of, use that to their advantage. But Bob, next week, we finally are at the first road course of the year. We're headed deep to the heart of Texas. We're going to COTA. We're going to combine all the short tracks together and still not quite have the same distance that we have at COTA. Huge track, road course racing. Looking ahead, what are you looking to see?
Yeah, I guess my biggest thing is, is it going to be the same road courses that we've seen the last few years, or are new guys going to show up? It seems like the same faces, Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott's kind of been in there a little bit, but Michael McDowell's been a factor at some of these races. AJ Allmendinger, obviously, Kyle Larson. Is Chase Elliott going to have a resurgence, though? Is he going to be the dominant guy this year at road courses? It seems like ever since the next gen cars come out, he's kind of regressed back to the field. There's so many different individual guys that I'm really, really fascinated on. And the other thing is, and I don't know if it's been confirmed, I probably should have looked at this, is SVG going to be running? Because if so, I'm really curious to see what his development's looking like now that he's been in a stock car for a few months. There's so many different layers to this.
Yeah, I agree. I think you bring up a really interesting point with SVG. Obviously making the transition, has found himself in the top 10 a couple of times in the Xfinity series, which, especially early on, I think as he's kind of getting used to the ovals. And there's a really good interview that Kevin Harvick did. If you're interested in understanding how he's making the transition, it's on Kevin Harvick's podcast. I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, it's very interesting, Bob, because you mentioned Chase Elliott. I think it's coming back, which is a weird thing for me of all people to say, because there is nobody who likes hitting the panic button on Chase Elliott more than I do. But after this week and kind of seeing, when skill matters the most, he always shows up. And I think road courses is one of those situations, and especially COTA. I think I just got a good feeling about it. I'm not going to admit it out loud, except I definitely just did admit it out loud, but it seems as if they're getting ready to turn things around.
When you saw him run P2 at the Indy Road Course to Michael McDowell last year, it's not like he's just fallen off a cliff, but you just saw him, in the first, few years of his career when he really came onto the scene where he was dominating those road courses. He was in a high percentage with Tony Stewart and Jeff Gordon at one point on road course win percentage. And, Kyle Larson's won a road course since then. William Byron's won a road course since then. He's not just the only guy in his team that can win these road courses. So I'm very curious to see how Chase Elliott performs at COTA. Kyle Busch, even, has been historically a decent road course racer. Can he turn things around with that 8 car? We talked about him earlier, but the other one, of course, is AJ Allmendinger. Kaulig might waste another win here, but the dinger's always going to be a factor. There's a lot of different variables moving in this week. And even, the ringers that'll come in. Kobayashi's coming in for Toyota. I think we'll probably see a couple more guys ring the bell here with announcements this week. But it's always fun when we go to a track that F1 races at, because everyone always gets to see the difference. We don't do track limits over here. We are wrecking each other all the way until they make it to the Dallas County line.
Yes, I think it's as Kyle Busch explained so eloquently on the Pat McAfee show this week, F1 is dainty. They've got champagne glasses, very classy. And NASCAR, we beat, we bang, everybody's getting into each other. We're here to be rowdy. We're here to have a good time. And this is one of my favorite road courses of the year. I think COTA really does lend itself well to stock car racing, especially, the image you kind of get of everybody fanning out going into turn one and trying to figure out the chaos that is that, kind of the turn one, that left-hander. It's always fun. And I'm just, I think the one guy I think I'm really looking forward to, kind of seeing if he could jumpstart the season is Tyler Reddick. We mentioned him a little bit when we were kind of going through our short list of people, but definitely someone who has had speed and obviously has the advantage of being in a Toyota, but another guy that I think, if there's ever a time to get going, this is as good a time as any for him.
Definitely. It seems like Tyler Reddick's always a factor when it comes to these road courses now. That the man has just been dialed in for the last few years, and especially now getting in that 2311 car with the sim data, and they've got so much resources there for him that it really just show the raw speed that Tyler Reddick has on some of these road courses. He's definitely going to be a factor there. As far as my pick for COTA, and just to kind of throw you in there, you could go a bunch of different ways. I wouldn't even be shocked if an Austin Cindric snuck his way up there. He is historically a good road course racer, but it's hard to pick against the usual guys there. And honestly, I'm going to piggyback off you. I'm going to go Tyler Reddick for this week. It feels like 2311 has just kind of lacked some speed the last few weeks. Tyler Reddick hasn't been able to get the results this year that he's wanted. He came up second to Kyle Larson in Vegas, but when it comes to road courses, Tyler Reddick is always a factor. And at some point, if you race 4 or 5 road courses, he's going to win one of them. So I'm going to just, take my bet now and run with it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of follow the same logic, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Kyle Larson. I mean, it's the safest pick in the book. Anytime I need to make a pick on this show, he is my, SpongeBob pulling out Old Reliable. That is my Old Reliable, is Kyle Larson to win. I mean, is it groundbreaking to say? No, absolutely not. But if you look at the trends, look at how he's been running, and just understanding he's the best race car driver in the world, he's due. And, it's hard to bet against Kyle Larson when he's due, and he certainly is due, especially after the start of this year.
100%. Is there anything else that we've missed from the on-track stuff this week? We'll get into we've only got a little bit of off-track stuff this week, but anything else that we need to put a bow on here as far as what Bristol looked like? God, it was nice to be at the concrete coliseum.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think just to put a bow on it, what a race, man. It truly was. That was special. And to have that much variety of what we were watching, whether it was tire fall off or, just the right amount of cautions, in my opinion. I think enough to keep it competitive, but not enough to make the race super choppy. I think we got some really good green flag runs. This really was NASCAR at its best. It was short track racing. There was drama all around. I mean, heck, Ross Chastain, Ryan Blaney, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about it in the first 40 minutes of this podcast because there was just too much to talk about.
Well. Also, Ryan Blaney answered a question after the race and said, "I'm tired of being asked about Ross Chastain. Leave it alone." So maybe we're just heeding the Blaney call too. Seems like those guys can't stay away from each other. Along with Logano and John Hunter Nemechek, that's a budding rivalry as well. But I even saw on Twitter this week Eric Jones reaching out to Chase Briscoe, and Briscoe saying that never happened, and then Eric Jones with the receipts on Twitter. So listen, we've got some beef brewing in the Cup Series already. We may be 5 races in, but it's the dog days of summer as far as NASCAR beef over here, Ad.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Netflix series or what it is, but these guys seem to be airing their dirty laundry out on the line a little bit more, and more power to us. I mean, I think, we could talk about kind of off-track stuff now and transition. Bob, 4 million people watched the Phoenix race, which is up, I believe it was 19%. I mean, that's huge. And to follow up, that big of a jump in viewership with a race like today that was, regardless of whether or not you really know what's going on in the sport, you were entertained today. There's a lot going on. And I just think the more races that they can string together like this, the more they keep the momentum from the Netflix show and everything going. I mean, it seems like we're cooking with gas here.
Absolutely. And despite Fox's best efforts, we are still getting entertainment on the track. So that's exciting to see. We did have one little thing off the track this week, Ad. You're talking about the summer and everything building up. NBC, their broadcast booth, we always look forward to it. It's going to look a lot different this year. Obviously, Dale Earnhardt Jr. announced that he will not be in the booth. He'll be at Amazon TNT. I believe it's just Amazon next year, 2025. But you got Rick Allen, who has been a longtime staple at NBC booth, over 10 years. I mean, he has been a staple for the NASCAR community. Going to be stepping down play-by-play after the Olympic break. NBC is going to be moving Leigh Diffey. He's their IndyCar play-by-play. I'm sure you've heard him in the Olympic sports one way or another. He's got a great Australian voice. But, we have been used to Rick Allen and Steve Letarte and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeff Burton in our voices in our homes the last few years. And so it's going to be a little bit different. What were your just initial thoughts seeing that? Middle of the season, NBC shaking up the broadcast booth.
Sad. I mean, it's one of those things that I think my knee-jerk reaction was really just kind of to be a little bit bummed out, because I really like Rick Allen calling the race. I think, I've always liked their broadcast. I think you reminded me that Dale Earnhardt Jr. isn't going to be on the broadcast. If Dale Earnhardt were on the broadcast, let me tell you, that'd be a long-distance phone call, fellas. But it just seems like they had some real chemistry in the booth, and it felt like an if it isn't broke, don't fix it situation. But obviously, you never really know what's going on Rick Allen's side of this, or what exactly brought this on. But I'm going to go in with an open mind. Like I can imagine. It's just I can't see it being bad. Especially, I like the IndyCar coverage. I think Leigh Diffey does a really good job. It's just going to be very different. I think you are going to get a lot of NASCAR fans who are not going to like hearing an accent announcing the race. But regardless, I think it's going to take some getting used to for all of us.
NASCAR fans scared of change? In my days, I've never.
Not my NASCAR.
Totally understand the fears with the NASCAR fans. It's something new. Rick Allen obviously has been a staple in that booth and is very polished as a broadcaster. Got a great voice, but there are moments where it feels kind of watered down at times. It just feels like he's very corporate. Got a great voice, but I just don't feel it sometimes. And I will say this, I'm on note that I watch a decent amount of IndyCar over here. Leigh Diffey is one of the best play-by-play guys in the world. So this is a massive upgrade. Obviously, yeah, you get the accent. Some people are iffy about that. I don't care, to be honest with you, one way or the other. I actually think the accent adds to it in the excitement. But there's a clip even of Leigh Diffey announcing one of the NASCAR races a few years ago. And him, yelling Kyle Larson, sending it into turn one. It was just a great call, and I think it's going to add to the excitement of the booth. He's a polished broadcaster, obviously, does their Olympic sports coverage as well, but the IndyCar broadcast with him and I think James Townsend it's just so freaking good. So, or James Hinchcliffe, but the fact that you get Leigh Diffey in the NASCAR booth with Jeff Burton, it's going to be a lot. I'm very curious what the full booth looks like if Letarte and Burton are back too, but I am all here for Leigh Diffey. I know we still get a little Rick Allen before the Olympic break, but so we get a little send off. But once he's gone, man, I'm so excited to hear Leigh Diffey.
I could just hear it now. Someone sitting in the Dawsonville pool hall and just saying, you know what? I'm iffy on Diffey. I'll tell you that much. I'm a little iffy on Diffey. And I just think, I think that's going to, do I think that I would like to be the person to start it? No, but I do think someone is going to pick the low-hanging fruit that is iffy on Diffey and will turn it into a hashtag. That's my prediction for the NBC part of the season.
There is definitely a man out there that boos Bubba Wallace that says the only Diffey I'll recognize in NASCAR is Joe Diffey. But, we have to evolve. We have to get a little bit in the future here. And I think Leigh Diffey is an absolute huge addition to the NBC broadcast. I love what he does. Curious to see if he balances IndyCar and NASCAR this fall. Obviously, their calendar starts to lighten up in the fall. But, hey, that man's going to be busy. He's going to be calling a lot of American motorsports. But
dude, imagine if they just throw him on the same helicopter with Kyle Larson doing the Indy double. Just to bring him
honestly, here for it. Honestly, here for it. Might as well at this point. Leigh Diffey and Kyle Larson both doing the Indy double. We can make that happen, I'm sure. Yeah. Ad, we like to make fun of the press here, but unfortunately, we are part of the NASCAR media as well now. I put that very loose terms, but if you've made it this far, of course, like, subscribe, share. We'll put out clips again so you can hear our beautiful voices and see our beautiful faces. But like I said, Ad, if you make it this far, God bless you. You're a diehard viewer.
Yeah, if you're listening at this part of the video, you're an absolute real one, and we do appreciate you. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep grinding this out, keep giving you our opinions, and we'll be here after every single race. We're going to keep going, and yeah, man, it's been a heck of a season to start. I'm very excited to see where we're going, and the fact that we had an even tire fall off today, Bob, it's kind of got me giddy. I'm just excited to see what we're going to get at COTA.
I'm just so glad for once NASCAR had the Netflix hype and the momentum, and they didn't squander it. They've had good racing. They've had storylines. They've had interest. They've had people that, if you're 50-50 on the fence of watching NASCAR, you've enjoyed the last few weeks. And that's huge just for, building a fan base that has historically been shrinking in size. So, Ad, we are going to do our best to grow the balls here at NASCAR. I'm sorry, what did I just say? Anyway, our Breaking Balls army is going to be growing. There you go. Again, like, subscribe, share. This is episode 74. We'll be back next week with 75 down in Austin. We'll keep it weird for you. Ad, you get the last words tonight.
Balls.